In 2010, University of California, Davis tested imported extra virgin olive oil from California supermarkets. 73% failed. Around 1900 BCE, palace scribes at Knossos recorded olive oil on clay tablets, stored in vessels holding 550 liters, filling storerooms estimated at 240,000 liters of liquid wealth. What underwrote Minoan civilization and circulated as Roman currency has been quietly replaced by industrial fraud. The question is, how the ledger broke? 73%. That is the failure rate when modern bottles labeled extra virgin olive oil are tested in American labs using gas chromatography and mass spectrometry. The number is not a rounding error or a statistical fluke. It is the result of a systematic audit, retail shelves sampled, bottles cracked open, chemical signatures compared against the legal definition of extra virgin. In the world's most regulated food markets, nearly 3 out of 4 bottles do not contain what they claim. Yet the earliest written ledger of olive oil, pressed into wet clay around 1900 BCE at Knossos, reads with a different kind of precision. The linear B script is not a story or a myth. It is a formula: quantity, commodity, recipient, container. 12 pipa azu for the shrine of A, 40 kylix azu for the king's feast. Each entry is a transaction, a line in the palace's liquid account book. The scribe's stylus, the ideogram for oil, the pythos sign, all combine to create a record that is both granular and absolute. The ledger, as a conceptual character, does not equivocate. It assigns, it distributes, it tallies. The oil exists because the ledger says so, and the storerooms confirm it in fired clay and stone. How did a commodity once tracked by the stroke of a reed on a tablet become a product that fails its own definition in the laboratory? The paradox is not only historical, it is material. The ledger has broken, but the question is where and how. A single pithos, one of the great jars lining these palace chambers, stood taller than a grown man and could hold around 550 liters of liquid. Archaeologists have cataloged over 200 of these vessels, their thick ceramic walls and broad mouths, engineered for both durability and access. The layout of the storerooms reveals a logic of scale: rows of pythoi arranged for efficient filling, inspection, and sealing, each jar a node in a network of inventory that stretched across the palace complex. Seal marks impressed into the clay recorded the responsible bureau or scribe, creating a system of accountability that matched the written tallies on the linear B tablets. The median pythos, measured at 150 centimeters in rim diameter and up to 180 centimeters in height, embodied a volumetric precision that modern audits can still reconstruct. Storerooms capable of holding over 160,000 liters of oil transformed the palace into a liquid granary, a treasury managed not by coin, but by the physical infrastructure of storage and the bureaucratic discipline of the administrators who maintained it. In the olive groves of Crete and the Aegean, some trees have stood for over 3,000 years. Their roots twist through soil that has seen the rise and fall of palaces, the collapse of empires, and the steady hand of generations who learned to read the land as an almanac. These groves are not relics. They are living lineages, genetically continuous with the trees whose fruit filled the great pythoi of Knossos. The process of extraction here is as old as the trees themselves. Olives are harvested by hand, pressed within 24 hours, and never exposed to heat or solvents. This method, unchanged for millennia, preserves the full spectrum of phenolic compounds, oleocanthal, oleuropein, and other antioxidants that define true extra virgin oil. Laboratory analysis confirms that oil pressed within a single day of harvest retains up to 90% of its phenolic content. Delay the pressing, and the profile collapses. The result is more than flavor or color. It is a chemical fingerprint, a benchmark for authenticity that modern industrial refining cannot reproduce. In these groves, the oil is not just a product, it is a direct inheritance, measured not in marketing claims, but in the unbroken chain from tree to press to amphora. The ancient granary was a physical reality, but the real wealth lay in the preservation of quality, secured by time, care, and the discipline of immediate cold extraction. On the outskirts of ancient Rome, a hill rises, not of earth, but of broken clay. Monte Testaccio stands as a silent monument to the imperial appetite for olive oil. Over centuries, officials and laborers dumped the shards of more than 53 million amphorae here, each vessel emptied of its precious cargo and stamped with the marks of its journey. The amphorae themselves tell a story. Most were Dressel 20s, standardized to hold about 70 liters, their rounded bodies and thick handles engineered for transport up the Tiber and into the city's storerooms. Impressed into their clay are names, consular dates, and the seal of the Annona, the Grain and Oil Provisioning Authority, who tracked every shipment as part of the state's accounting. This was not a private trade, but a public system. The Annona managed the flow of oil from the groves of Baetica in Spain to the heart of the empire, distributing rations to citizens as part of the urban dole. The amphora stamps served as physical ledgers, recording the producer, the inspector, and the year, each fragment a line in Rome's liquid account book. Archaeologists cataloging Monte Testaccio have identified over 150,000 distinct stamp impressions, allowing the reconstruction of supply chains that spanned continents. Pliny the Elder, writing in the 1st century, classified olive oil into a hierarchy of grades. Oleum ex albis ulivus for the imperial table, Oleum viride for the market, and Oleum cibarium for common use. These distinctions shaped price, taxation, and distribution. The legal framework, anchored by the lex frumentaria, treated oil as a form of currency, interchangeable with grain and recognized in tax payments. The mound itself became a monumental ledger, its layers marking the scale of state provisioning. In this system, olive oil was not a condiment, but a measure of civic wealth, counted, stamped, and stored as Rome's liquid treasury. In 1959, the International Olive Council gathered delegates in Madrid to draft a charter that would define olive oil for the modern era. The text introduced a tiered system: extra virgin, virgin, refined, pomace, each category bound to chemical parameters and sensory criteria. For extra virgin, the upper limit for free fatty acidity was set at 0.8%. Yet, within the legal prose, a subtle allowance appeared. Oils that had been deodorized or lightly refined could still enter the market, provided they passed the final chemical test. The ledger, once inscribed in clay and confirmed by the senses, was now rewritten as a regulatory table, its columns filled with thresholds and tolerances rather than the names of groves or presses. The European Union formalized this logic in Regulation 2568 from 1991. Every bottle labeled extra virgin must meet no more than 0.8% acidity and must also pass a sensory panel. But the regulation does not forbid the blending of deodorized oil so long as the final mixture conforms to the chemical profile. The law's language, designed for harmonization, left a loophole. Industrially processed oils, stripped of their original character, could be remixed and sold as authentic. The standard, once anchored in the immediacy of pressing and the integrity of the harvest, now rested on laboratory numbers and paperwork. The contrast with ancient practice is stark. Cato the Elder, writing in the 2nd century BCE, demanded immediate pressing and careful storage to preserve the oil's quality: no additives, no blending, no tolerance for delay. The Roman granary was built on the discipline of purity and the transparency of the ledger. The modern regulatory framework, by contrast, transformed the granary into a bureaucratic abstraction, one that could be manipulated by those willing to exploit the gray zones between chemistry and tradition. In this new system, the ledger's authority shifted from the physical stamp and the sealed jar to the language of permissible intervention, a shift that would open the door to industrial fraud on a scale the ancients never imagined. Operation Mama. MIA began with a tip to the Guardia di Finanza, Italy's financial police, about tankers leaving Apulia at night, bound for Northern Europe and the United States. Investigators tracked the shipments to a warehouse where drums of lampanti oil, too rancid for human consumption, were run through industrial deodorizing units. The process stripped away off flavors and odors, but left behind a product that could never pass as genuine extra virgin in a blind tasting. Court documents record how the oil was relabeled with forged certificates, claiming acidity levels below the legal 0.8% cutoff. In the spring of 2016, officers seized 12,000 liters of counterfeit oil, uncovering a paper trail that pointed to exports valued at over 7 million euros. 5 defendants received prison sentences of up to 4 years, and the ministry levied fines matching the scale of the fraud. Yet the bottles, now stamped extra virgin, had already reached supermarket shelves in the United States, their contents laundered by a loophole that allowed deodorized oil to masquerade as the real thing. In the laboratory, the fraud is not a matter of opinion, but of measurement. The 2011 UC Davis audit tested bottles labeled extra virgin from major brands and found that 86% failed to meet legal standards, either by chemical analysis or sensory panel. Using gas chromatography and mass spectrometry, scientists detected refined seed oils and off-flavor compounds, revealing that what passes as extra virgin in the marketplace is often a blend engineered to skirt the ledger of authenticity. High-resolution NMR spectroscopy, applied across 1,200 samples in a 2020 European survey, uncovered that 4.2% of bottles contained at least 5% cheap vegetable oil, a dilution invisible to the naked eye but unmasked by the instrument. The stakes go beyond labeling. In 2005, Gary Beauchamp's team identified oleocanthal, a phenolic molecule with anti-inflammatory effects comparable to ibuprofen, as a hallmark of true extra virgin oil. Clinical trials, most notably the pre-dimed study in 2013, confirmed a 30% reduction in cardiovascular events among those consuming authentic oil daily. The Granary of Health and Wealth, once managed by the scribe and the amphora, now depends on the vigilance of scientists and the rigor of clinical evidence. Today, supermarket shelves offer bottles labeled olive oil, yet laboratory audits confirm most cannot pass as true extra virgin. The ancient ledger demanded proof, not promises. For consumers seeking real oil, trust only harvest year, estate origin, and laboratory certification. The Granary remains. Subscribe to Forgotten Granary for deeper investigations.